Lovely. So in the interest of time, I think we're going to get started. Thank you everyone for being here this afternoon. We're very pleased to be hosting Professor Kelly Edmunds today in this Learning and Teaching webinar series. There we go. Yes. Professor Kelly Edmunds is Professor of Biology, Education and Student Experience at the University of East Anglia. She's a National Teaching Fellow, a Kate Award winner. She holds Senior Fellowship of Advanced HE, and she's a Fellow of the European First Year Experience Network. She works both at undergraduate and postgraduate levels, and she has done and is doing a lot of work on the area of belonging, with the idea of understanding the needs of student cohorts and using this information to tailor support during their transition into university. Kelly helps organize the annual Student Belonging Conference. It's in its 4th year now, and she has established a community of practice focused on student belonging, which has around 600 members from various continents. She has published extensively within the area of student experience, and we're very lucky that today she will be talking to us about building belonging from the beginning. So without further ado, the floor is hers. I just wanted to ask you, please, if you could mute your mics. There will be time for questions at the end, but also feel free to write your questions in the chat if there's something that you don't want us to forget as we go along. And that's it. Thank you, Kelly, for being here today. Much appreciated.
Oh, thanks for inviting me, Mel. Yeah, I'm really pleased to come along. I can see the chat as well. I've got all my screens going, so I can see the chat as well. I'll keep an eye. Thank you so much for inviting me, Mel. Yeah, I'm really pleased to come and talk today. There's a lot. You've done a lovely intro there, Mel, and it always makes you feel a bit uncomfortable when people say nice things about you. But there's a lot I could cover, and I'm actually, what's perhaps worse than hearing other people say nice things about you is that I'm now just gonna, if you'll indulge me for the first slide, I want to tell you a little bit about my journey, and there's good reasons for this. It's not just me wanting to talk about myself. I'd much rather not, but there we are. So I'm going to start by telling you a bit about me. There we go. I'm from a town on the south coast called Hastings. You may know of it, the Bayeux Tapestry here. I'm going to skip you through this quite quickly, but it is relevant, and I'll come to why in a moment. But I'm from Hastings on the south coast. It's an area of multiple deprivation, and growing up, I didn't know anybody who'd been to university other than my teachers, and that's not what they talked to us about. So I was very naive when it came to university, although I didn't realise this at the time. When I was from about 15, 16 onwards, I wanted to be a physiotherapist. I really liked trying to understand how the body worked, and so I thought I was building the experience. I would get weekly work experience at an amazing clinic near my school, and I would go there every Friday afternoon to get some experience, and I thought I was doing all the right things to go to university to study physiotherapy. As part of trying to pick which university to go to, and with the naivety that I now realise I had, my dad couldn't take me to university to visit UEA on an official open day. And so we turned up on a random weekday because that's when we could go. And so we turned up on a random weekday and we were looking for the School of Physiotherapy and we couldn't find it. And we thought, well, biological sciences, that's lots of physiotherapy is biological sciences. The School of Physio is probably nearby. So we found ourselves in the School of Biological Sciences thinking that universities were mapped according to subject and that we'd then be able to find the School of Physiotherapy. And we were quite obviously lost wandering around the corridors. And somebody who is now a colleague, this is a long time ago, I'm quite older than the sunshine on my face now probably allows me to look. But this was some time ago, and somebody who's now a colleague found us and spent a huge amount of time with us, talking to my dad and I about the university. And I loved it here. It really felt like UEA felt like the right place for me. But alas, I wasn't doing a chemistry A-level. My school did not send many students to university, certainly none for the kind of physiotherapy and those sorts of subjects. And so nobody had told me that chemistry would be a good subject to pursue at A-level. So I wasn't doing it. And that really impacted on the offers I got. So I was left facing go to the university, which felt right. And that's one of the key reasons I'm telling you this, skipping through my life history, is I had to go to either choose a course I really wanted to do, but at a university that I wasn't excited about, or go to somewhere that felt like the right place for me. And I already felt that connection and that idea of belonging. So that's really important. And it's fundamental, I think, to lots of that drives why I do what I do now. And I chose the place that felt right. And so I'm at UEA now, and this is where I studied as a student as well. Whilst I was in one of my lectures, I wasn't offered physiotherapy here, I should say. I was offered zoology with physiology. And I thought, oh, physiology, that's very similar. I'll just transfer across once I'm there, just get in, and then it's easy to move across. And of course, that it also isn't quite how it happens. So I was on a zoology with physiology degree, and as good fortune would have it, turns out I loved zoology. And so I was fortunate enough to go to Mauritius. After my undergraduate, I spent 6 months volunteering there. I ended up staying there for 5 years. Whilst I was there, I was approached by one of my old lecturers to be the applicant on a PhD, for the named applicant on a PhD studentship to work in Southeast Asia. And I worked on wildlife diseases, primarily looking at avian influenza. And whilst I was doing that, I was offered some teaching hours for a growing centre for international students here at UEA. It was very small at the time, the centre, and I knew the person that was setting up their science courses, and they needed some annual leave, and they only had one science member of staff at the time. So she knew me and asked if I would cover some hours, and I did. And that led to everything that's come on since. I covered some teaching hours, the students learnt some things. They asked me to cover more hours. The students learnt some more things. And then before you know it, I've been at UEA for now over 15 years. I've had 2 children in 2016 and 2019. I became a member of staff on an indefinite contract in 2017. So it was all fixed term and bit part contracts until then. And as Mel just said, Professor of Biology Education Student Experience last summer. And the reason I mention all of this is to give you the kind of where I think my interest in belonging came from, because I instantly felt I belonged here on this campus from the first time my dad and I visited on a random weekday that was convenient for us. And that's underpinned everything I think I've gone on to do since. The other reason I've just told you about myself is really not anything to do with me enjoying telling my life history, but because there might be something I've just said that means you feel more connected to me than you did at the start. Maybe you've also got 2 kids. Maybe you also are an accidental academic like me. It wasn't my plan. Maybe you also were the first in family and were naive entering university. But somewhere, maybe we've now got a connection that wasn't there 5 minutes ago. And much of what I'm going to go on to talk about is these connections, because that's really key to belonging. So thinking about belonging, a sense of belonging, and this is the campus that I instantly felt I belonged to. Lots of green spaces really resonates with me, soothes my soul. So sense of belonging, and some questions for you to perhaps start to think about is, what is belonging? How do we create it and capture it and measure it? These are all really difficult things. I'm not going to go too much into all of these, but it's something that we cannot describe very easily, but it connects with us in some way. It might be positive connections, and hopefully, like, I loved it here, but it also might be negatives as well. So thinking about belonging, there's a few things I'm going to mention, kind of what's happening across the sector with belonging, and then I'll take you through some kind of practical things that I do that I think help to make these connections with students, and also help the students to make connections that boost their sense of belonging too. So first thing I want to highlight, I want to do a massive shout out to David Galani, because he's an absolute superstar in the belonging space, and I'm sure several of you will know of him. But he published a paper last year that came off the back of his PhD exploring belonging, which shows there's been a surge in research interest in student belonging. And you can see from this top figure here, just kind of that surge has really happened relatively recently. And we've got publications coming from multiple countries in the world. This is not something that's necessarily only happening here in the UK or in the States, but there's publications being contributed from elsewhere. And we've worked with David to build on this work and this partially written paper, but we're getting there. It's stuck at me. Sorry if anybody involved in it is here. But we built on that work to kind of explore that booming belonging. So this is the same pattern that David's figure showed, what's happening in terms of undergraduate versus postgraduate. And so one of the areas Mel mentioned at the beginning that I'm working on is I work across the undergraduate and postgraduate space. We know there's a boom in belonging research, but that is being driven largely by undergraduates. So if any of you are doing anything around belonging for postgraduates and you're wondering whether to publish it, there's not much out there. We'd love to hear what you've been doing, because there's a real paucity of research focusing on postgraduate student belonging. One of the questions I put to you just now is about how we measure belonging, and I want to give a shout out to work of Nicola Byram. That's the You Belong project. Nicola and the team at King's have found, so I think it's 196 different metrics for measuring belonging. And Tom Ritchie, who I think is here, I think you signposted me to this, so thanks for that, Tom, because it was perfect for the point I want to make here. So You Belong, they've come up with a You Belong toolkit, and they're doing a whole host of work around that. I'll put links to all of these at the end, but You Belong, I think it literally is you-belong.uk if you're interested in that toolkit. So it's all sorts of resources, papers, everything that they're trying to capture it all and think about what you can do to bring more belonging into your work. But they found close to 200 different metrics for measuring belonging. So we know there's more research around belonging, more being published, but how are we meant to consistently capture that when there are so many different ways of measuring it? So this is thinking in higher education. Borsch et al. Found 31 different ways of measuring belonging in a school setting. And the reason I've added this on here is a key point I want to make, is that belonging comes not just with connections to people, but connections to places and spaces. So our students feel belonging to maybe a club or society, perhaps to their course, but perhaps to people as well. And so 31 different ways of measuring belonging they found in schools, and lots of those seem to be centred around places, spaces and people. So hold that in mind. So we know that there's a surge in interest. We know it's hard to measure what belonging is, but what we do know are three key things. And that is that belonging is very variable by its context. So that could be what works in the sciences might not work in humanities. So if I think, for example, I am a biological scientist, not the physiotherapist I thought I'd be, I'm a biological scientist. And one of the ways I help my students to build a sense of belonging is around their role as a scientist and connecting them to the labs and to science and experiments. That's not obviously going to work in the humanities. There are different ways of different contexts around distance versus campus learners and how they might interact with those places and spaces that I mentioned. So belonging is variable by context. It's hard to measure all those different metrics. And if we can't really measure, if we can't capture that idea of what belonging is, if we can't come up with a formula for belonging, it's really hard to then embed that into policy and to report on it. And belonging is dynamic. And again, David Galani's published widely on this. Belonging's dynamic, changing all the time. What students need to feel that early sense of belonging when they arrive at university quickly changes through that first semester and in their subsequent years of study. So it's dynamic for each student. It's different between cohorts and different between courses. So trying to work in the space of belonging is a little bit like swimming through treacle, because everything's changing around you. All these moving parts are changing around you all the time. And so it makes it really hard to measure and to come up with a recipe that's definitely going to work for all of your students all of the time. And honestly, it's not even worth trying because it can't. It's moving so much. But there are lots of things that can be done. So I'd like to pose a question, and because I can see the chat, I think let's see how this works, Mel, if that's all right with you. Have a little think about what you include in your practice that you think helps students to feel a sense of belonging. And if you're happy to share it in the chat, do. Don't have to, but if there's something you think you do, let's share some of that practice. Let's see if everybody can leave here with some ideas of things they could do. So is there anything you can think of that you might do within your own practice to help your students feel a sense of belonging? And it's not going to be one way. I'm going to tell you lots of the things I do as well in a moment. I'm going to slurp my tea while I hope you're typing. Oh, great one, Morgan. Brilliant. That comes up for me in a couple of slides' times. So learning and using names, induction and orientation session. Thank you very much. Share small personal anecdotes and stories. Great, Sarah, like I just did as well. That really came clear in pandemic, when we pivoted to an online scenario and the students got a rare insight into our lives. Our cats walked past the screen, or one of my colleagues, their washing machine cycle coincided with a seminar we ran every week, and it would start beeping halfway through to say it was finished. Just these silly little anecdotes. Lollipops. Oh, loads are coming really. Everyone's typed at the same pace here. Yeah. Hello as they enter the room, asking how they are. I've had colleagues say to me before that a student had said to them, thanks for using my name today. Nobody else has ever called me by my name here before. Isn't that sad? Yeah, lots of using eye contact, finding out, humanising touches. Brilliant. Oh, this is amazing. Lots of you are doing these sorts of connections, making these connections as well. Great. I feel like I'm talking to a load of experts in relational pedagogy, so that's wonderful, because that touches on lots of what we're going to do later on. What you've described there, and I'm really glad you have, is around lots of moments. So a sense of belonging is built in moments. Thanks, Tom. I know Tom Ritchie, we share that kind of phrasing. Belonging is built in moments we capture, moments that we create for our students. And it's about creating these moments. That means that, and they all piece together to create connections to places and spaces and people for our students. So students feel belonging through connections to these places, spaces and people. And it's not necessarily the big events and activities that we do. They can feel very overwhelming for lots of our students. It's not the event itself, but it's what happens within that event. So I've put in here, and that's why there was pizza from the previous slide. Students don't feel a sense of belonging because they went to an event that had free pizza. It's not about the free pizza. It's about whether somebody asked them how they were, like you guys have just put in the chat, the staff member who asked them about their day, who remembered their name, or perhaps ordered vegan pizza just in case there were some students who are vegan coming along. These are the moments that matter, and these, what feel like nothing moments, often they feel like a nothing thing, can feel like a really big thing to some of our students. So I'm delighted that so many of you are doing lots of these kinds of things already that are helping to build these connections for our students. Because if we can help our students to build these connections, they're more likely to feel safe. And if they feel safe, we know these guiding principles, students who feel safe are more likely to engage, which means they're more likely to learn and retain information, and they're more likely to persist and stay at university and go on to academic success. So I'm going to start dipping into my research now. So my research is centred on helping to build those connections with our students and between the student cohorts, to help them feel that they matter, that they're valued, and ultimately with the hope that they are more likely to continue at university and to thrive. So there's 3 core pillars to my work. I'm not going to go through each in turn, but I'm going to tell you some examples of how I dip into these pillars. The 3 core pillars of my work, and this is what Mel asked me to come along and talk about, is belonging built on the pillars of well-being, connections, and learner agency. And I'll touch on learner agency towards the end, but most of what I'll cover is connection and well-being. What I'm going to do for the next few slides is to give you some examples of what I do, and these aren't going to work in every context, and I'm not saying everybody needs to do them. These are just examples of what works in my practice. Feel free to borrow still, I don't mind. If it works for me and it works for your students, that's great. I'm not precious about these things. I'm going to frame them in 2 slightly different ways. So there's going to be some super quick wins, things that I do that are really quick, that help with the student experience. They might help with belonging and building of connections. So these take less than 3 minutes of preparation time, hence the super quick. And then I'm going to go on to a few quick wins. They take a little bit longer. And as you'll see with them, some of them are worth the investment and are actually quicker after that first year of setting them up. They're actually a bit quicker to do later on. So the first one I'm actually doing myself, and it's using subtitles. And this is quite Marmite for my colleagues and I, because we're of a generation, lots of us are a generation that doesn't like subtitles. I have an almost 10-year-old at home who loves having subtitles on the television, and my husband despises them, and it's a source of constant tension between the two of them. So I'm anticipating that lots of you are sitting there going, oh, subtitles are really distracting. I wish Kelly wasn't using them, but I am. There is research, multiple polls, multiple surveys have been done to show that young people the majority prefer subtitles. Not all, and it's not perfect. Some would rather not have them. There is no perfect way of doing them, but for the majority of young people, they prefer subtitles. And not always because they need subtitles. So captions aren't just for those who are deaf of hard or hard of hearing anymore. They can help many other students as well. So the first super quick win I'll put your way, and I leave it to you to decide if you want to do it, is subtitles. It's really simple. It's literally one button click on PowerPoint. So less than 3 minutes. It's actually more like 3 seconds to get those going. And this has really come into its own for me. In the last 3 years, I've had 3 instances where I had students in my lecture theatre who had cochlear implants, and I didn't find out about them until about halfway through semester 1. And they had been able to engage because I was using subtitles. So it's not even necessarily about looking for the majority of students, but there are some students for whom they make a massive difference. So I will keep using subtitles. The second super quick win is micro breaks in your lectures. There are loads of different ways to do this. And I'll show you how I do it, but there's loads of different ways. Depends if you have the size of your cohort will vary, how long your lecture blocks might be varies. It's not possible in a lab setting necessarily, but here's some of the ways that I do it. And there's evidence. I've just put this one on here, but there's also evidence from Mind, the mental health wellbeing charity, that show that micro breaks can be really good for our general wellbeing, but also alleviating fatigue, boosting our productivity. But I've also had examples of students for whom my lectures coincided with a time when they needed to pray, and because they knew there would be a break coming, they were able to attend the lecture. They would pray during the break, and they would come up and say, I'm going to be a little bit late, I'm going to pray in the break, not a problem to me. But that was something they knew they could do because they knew there were breaks in my lectures. So I do micro breaks that I do are 3 minutes long. I do them in a variety of ways, and I've got 4 or 5 examples I'll show you, and you'll just see how they vary. So this is an example of a 3-minute break I use for foundation year level students, and I give them this example and ask them what they think the image shows. The answer is under here is a little painted rock. The answer here, this is not covering. I've had answers of a mushroom. Is it covering a large mushroom? If you think you might have the answer, you can pop it in the chat. I'll see it come up. But I put this in a lecture, and I'll give you a bit of a clue. The lecture is preparing students for practical exploring osmosis, which is the movement of water across membranes. So I put this slide up and I say to them, here's a 3-minute break. You may check your phone if you need to take medication, if you need to go for a stretch your legs, if you need a rest break, whatever you need, fine. Or you can do this if you like. So it's something there that's connected to what we're doing in the lecture, but they're free to do what they like in that short break. I don't see any suggestions in the chat, so I'll tell you. So this is the source of the Zambezi River. And so it's a tenuous connection to osmosis, the movement of water molecules across the membrane, because I then show them that from this source, it goes on to create the incredible falls here. So movement of water on a much grander scale than we're looking at in the practicals that I'm preparing them for. So there's an example there. This one is also related to when I'm teaching the students about cells. So what do they think is happening between these cells? And there's obviously, this is an unfertilized egg cell down here. These are from zebrafish, and we've got abnormal development happening here. So this, again, connected to the content we're covering. I show this in my very first lecture. I think it comes a little bit across to the students like a humble brag, because it is somewhere very nice where I am. But for lots of the students, it's connecting them to a particular part of the world that they might have perhaps family connections to. So the answer is that I'm stood in India, and this is Bhutan across the river, and this is the Brahmaputra River. Just not related at all to the content, but helping them to connect to me. And then I tell them a little bit about why I was standing in India looking at Bhutan. I get them to do just activities that they can do quietly like this, saying the alphabet backwards, just using a different part of the brain. So not taking information in, but engaging a different part of the brain that can help to relax and reduce anxiety. So lots of different examples. There's loads of ways of doing this. And so it takes less than 3 minutes of my time to create this slide, and it can be related to content. It can be something. I've done Where's Wally? I've done Where's David Attenborough? There's a book of Where's David Attenborough, and it's pictures like Where's Wally ones. There's all sorts you can do, and it's literally pasting a picture in. Another super quick win for the context, my discipline context, is around showing scientists but other role models on your slides. So here's some research by Dominic Henry, Kira Coates and Catherine Hubbard. So here's the lead author. So this is how I go about doing it. Here's their research, which shows the benefits of showing scientists to try and get rid of some of the assumptions of bias for scientists and who scientists are. Might not be relevant for your context, but you might have other ways that you can think of doing this to perhaps overcome some of these biases. And so this is what it might look like in one of my slides, for example. So here I'm talking about the life cycle of a retrovirus. And I mentioned that these are the some of the key pioneers in this area who made these discoveries, and they received the 1975 Nobel Prize, and here they are. So again, a simple way, takes less than 3 minutes, but it might help my students to think, oh, there's a scientist who has a name like me, looks like me, sounds like they come from a country the same as me, make these connections and break down some of the stereotypes and biases within my particular field. So there's some of the super quick wins. The slightly longer activities, and this one is an idea that I came up with along with my colleague Bethan Gulliver, who's up here. She's in the Norwich Medical School here. And we started doing this during the pandemic when it was just harder to make connections with our students and keep track of how they were doing, because they were spread out all over the place and we weren't seeing them each week, and you couldn't necessarily pick up in the same way as we would in person if they're confused and struggling. So we came up with these weekly checklists. And what we do is we upload our weekly checklists to our VLE. We use Blackboard Ultra here. And I send out an announcement usually on a Monday morning. That goes to the student with the checklist, and the checklist tells the students what's happening that week, what they can expect from the week, what they're expected to do that week, and kind of help them keep track of where they're going. So I create them once, and then each year I update them for different dates, or as you might see on here as an example. So the timings might change for things like this, but it's a single sheet of A4, and they can tick off the activities as they go. So it helps them to keep track. I might put, if there's, I've got some of my students have got to do some work for a statistics seminar this Friday, and I started to kind of let them know that was coming via the checklist a couple of weeks ago. I imagine lots of us are having challenges around in-person engagement, but this is a way of making sure students have been told all the things they should be doing in one place. If they're not in the lecture theatre when I say it, they've got it on their weekly checklist that comes out on a Monday. So that's been really nice and really positive, and has been adopted throughout the school as well. I also do various activities to connect students to their home, connect their work, that should perhaps a university rather than work, but their academic work and their home lives. And there's lots of ways of doing this. Our central team here, our student experience team, run various crafting sessions that students can make things that they take back to their room or their home or their halls of residence. One way I do this is in semester 1 of year 1, I run a diversity of life module. And in that session, the students get to plant a seed. They get a little pot, a little seedling pot with some soil. They plant some seeds and they take it home and they get their little plant pet. And then this is in the very first session that they do for my module. So they're in the lab, might feel overwhelming, might feel scary coming into a big lab, but don't worry guys, because you're just going to plant some seeds to start with. And they get to take that home. And then in week 9, they bring the seedling in and they're going to extract DNA from a leaf or a portion of the leaf of that plant pet, and they find out what they've been growing. And this started out as almost a nothing thing. So one of my colleagues was already running this, but he was sending the students out of the lab onto campus to find some plant material that they brought back. And I said, do you think we could actually help them to grow that plant? He said, yeah, why not? And if they forget to bring it in, then they just go out onto campus and get a bit of plant material anyway. But it's worked really nicely for the students. They've really enjoyed taking these little plant pets home. And it helps to bring connection between their learning space and their personal space. So students are telling us all sorts of things about how they've been able to go home and engage their families with this. Their kids are getting excited about the seedlings that are growing. I had one student who sent me what I thought was a prank email describing in detail how their mother had accidentally hoovered up their their pet, their plant pet, because it had fallen off the windowsill while she was hoovering, and she'd hoovered it up. And he amusingly told me how he hadn't spoken to her for quite some time after this. He was so distraught. But it's been really impactful and really effective. And we have these a Padlet, and the students can share how their plant pets are doing. And unfortunately, we've had a bit of an accident for this one, but they get really excited. This student didn't think their seedling would even get this far, so a sense of achievement that they're feeling from this. So it's a really nice, really simple activity. It takes very little effort from me. I just have to make sure there's enough plant pots and some soil. And the seeds that we're using are actually left over from a colleague's wedding when they gave out little wildflower packets. So it's really nice when they say, where are the seeds from? And I'm like, well, actually, one of your lecturers got married and these are the seeds from the wedding. So really lovely connections that we bring in to connect their work and home lives. The very final thing I'm going to tell you about takes more than 10 minutes, like hands up, a lot more than 10 minutes. But this is one of the areas around learner agency. If you remember the 3 pillars I said about. So this is for learner agency. And what I do, so lots of more than 10 minutes denoted here. This is about giving students control where possible over their learning. And it's hard and it's not possible that often in my experience, but there are ways of doing this. And one way I do this is with an assessment. This is for foundation year students. So I teach across all levels, but this is for foundation year students. And what I do is the very first session that I meet them, I ask them this question that's in bold here. What are the grand challenges facing biologists? And they come up with answers and we put them, I do it through, I've done it through Poll EV, but I also now, whatever audience polling software you use, it will work. You can even do bits of paper. So they come up with these ideas and then I say, brilliant. Your top 4 answers, the ones that have come up most often, are now your shortlist for the presentation you're going to do later this semester. And I say, you're going to do a presentation. You will do more presentations at university, but for this first presentation that you have to do at university, I'm giving you as much control as I possibly can. And that starts with the shortlist, which you guys have come up with yourself. You choose a topic. You're just going to do 5-minute presentation to a group of students from the module. You choose if you do that live or via a recording, and you choose from about 8 different time slots when you're going to present it. So I've given them control of the shortlist, the topic within that shortlist, if they do it live or a recording, and when they present. So if they take medication at a certain time of day, if getting here for 9 a.m. from a school run is stressful, they pick a different slot. So I've given them as much control as I can. And obviously, majority of students are anxious about presenting. And so I try to do this in a, you're going to have to present at some point. So let's make that first time one that you control as much as is possible. And this was a bit of a gamble when I first did it, because I didn't know if that would be enough for them to feel more reassured about it. But the live versus recording seems to be really reassuring for them. We've done this for 3 years now, and it's almost 50-50 each year where they choose live versus recording. But we have had 100% is a tiny live. We had 1 student this year that didn't want to do this. This is out of cohort sizes of 70-ish. So over 3 years, we've had 1 student who did the recording. When we asked them, would you do a recording again, said, no, I would do it live. And that's phenomenal. So just being able to give them that control has made for what we hope is a more positive experience for something that is stressful. And I'm not saying we've taken all the stress away, but we've given them control and they've shown themselves that they can do it. So that's really nice. And I'm not sure, maybe it's not possible in your context, but it is that autonomy, and that ability to give students that autonomy is probably possible in various ways within different settings. So I've given you lots of ideas of things I do. There are lots of other people doing great things as well, and some of them are in this session too. All of what I do is built around relational pedagogy, making these connections, helping students to relate positively to, hopefully, to me, those around them, the places, spaces and people. So embedding relational pedagogy in practice helps to foster stronger connections, more connected, better connected student communities. And if we can create these strong connections and allow students to find places, spaces and people that enable them to feel these little moments of belonging, what we're hopefully doing is building student communities which are engaged and more likely to persist. I've given you a few ideas, and maybe you've got questions, and I'm about to wrap up. So if you want to start popping questions in the chat, now would be a good time. But I'm also, before I'm kind of finished talking about me, I'm going to signpost you to lots of free, and all of these are free opportunities to think about these things, to hear more about these sorts of things, and not just from me, from lots of other people. And the first I'm going to showcase to you is led by an incredible colleague of mine. That's Lauren Flannery in the top corner there. And Lauren Flannery and Elizabeth Schofield. Elizabeth is also wonderful, but Elizabeth is no longer at UEA. And so Lauren is driving this now. They developed a free 5-week course on the Future Learn platform. And it's all around relational pedagogy, reflective practice. Thanks, Tom. I can see you clapping. Yeah. It's a free 5-week, 20-hour online training program. You don't have to, it's not scheduled sessions. Once you've signed up, you work through in your own time. That QR code will take you there, and I'll put the links in the chat in a moment. But it will help you reflect on your practice. It will help you to you'll hear lots of examples from other people and think about how you can build better connected student communities in your own context as well. So it's incredible. I got to review the course for them, and it really did change how I see. It helped me better understand why I do things the way I do them. So one big props to them. And I'm going to give you some more opportunities here. So Tom Ritchie, who just gave Lauren a little clap there. Tom has led a team that have developed the Centre for Belonging in Education that has just launched a week or two ago, I think, Tom. And that QR code will take you to their website. There's lots of events coming, and I don't know if you want to pop any links in the chat, Tom, because I know there's lots of belonging focused events that cross countries, international opportunities that are coming up. So do feel free to hijack this and pop them in the chat if you want to, Tom. So if that sounds interesting, if you're interested in just following what they're doing, reaching out to and connecting with that community, or looking at the resources, joining the events, please do. Again, free opportunities and inclusive as much as possible, being virtual or hybrid whenever possible. At the start, Mel talked about my student belonging community of practice. And again, I'll put all the links to these. If you can't scan the QR code, don't worry about it. I'll put them in the chat in a second. I just can't do it whilst doing this. Oh, thanks, Mel. Student belonging community of practice came out of a conference that we led here at UEA in 2023. And it's, yes, now over 600 members, monthly webinars. We do an annual conference. Our conference is hybrid and free. The best conferences should be, if they can be, hybrid and free. Makes it more, the number of people that can't engage in person. I'm one of them, for the 2 little people I told you about at the start that were born in the last 10 years. Very difficult to travel. So it's online, it's hybrid, it's free. You can come in person if you'd like as well, and we'll give you lunch if you do. But opportunities to hear from others working in the sector, across the sector, in the area of belonging. We'd love to have you if you want to join us. The conference is May the 19th this year, for anyone who's wondering when it might be. It's on May the 19th, but you can go on and sign up, and at the end it will say, I can't make it this year, but keep me informed of other things that are happening. So there's that as well. And the final one from me is to showcase, Tom, I've mentioned you just happen to be on the slide I've chosen here. That community of practice that I've talked about, one of our biggest outputs, we have our monthly webinars, but we've also got a book that came out last October, and we're officially launching it with a virtual book launch, again, free, next week. Don't worry if you're not free for the full 2 hours, come along to whatever you are available for. And again, I'll pop the sign up link for that in the chat in a moment as well, which I think Mel's getting through them. Yeah, I'll look at that. Amazing. Thank you so much, Mel. How have I done? Look, you said about 40 minutes, Mel. I'm bang on. So thank you. That's me. That's everything I wanted to cover. I am really happy to take any questions. I'll stop sharing the slides for now, if that's okay. And we can just have a discussion, and I'll pick up any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kelly. Much appreciated. Yeah, I did put some of the links there in the chat, but if it's okay with you, we'll be sharing the slides anyway later on, so people can have access to them. There are a couple of questions in the chat. Let me just go back. The first one I think is from Lucian.
Yeah, I can see that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so any ideas for disciplines that are much more theoretical, for example, where physical artifacts are not normally part of the course? I like the development of the emotional attachment side of things. I think, yeah, discipline specific. If you want to say what your discipline is, I can probably come up with some more disciplines.
Business courses, Kelly. Sorry, that's me. Business
Yeah.
courses, Kelly. So where we teach students a whole bunch of theory and all that, but they don't necessarily get their hands on the physical artifact. For example, arts students, they're much more physical. I don't know, engineering students are much more physical, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
Ours are, you know, much more theoretical from that perspective. So any thoughts, if you have any?
So one immediate thought would be you could ask the students to bring in something that they, I'm thinking, so our business school here, if I think of marketing, for example, falls under our business school, and I imagine it does yours as well. You could ask them to bring in or share an example, whether it's a printout of something that they bought that they weren't planning on buying. Why did they buy that? What was it about the marketing campaign that they connected with? And you could then group the things they brought in. So maybe they brought in, loads of them might bring in something that reminded them of home, or something that reminded them of their childhood, a sport they played in their childhood, or they liked the colour, or those sorts of things.
That's excellent. I love it. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's excellent. And yeah, I can immediately see how you can do that for any business course, you know. I don't know, bring something that's cost less than 10 quid on an accounting course,
Yeah.
or bring something that could, I don't know, disappear as a product in 10 years' time on a business course. Sorry, you just gave me a million ideas. Thank you.
Brilliant. What's just happened is what we call here, Lauren and I call that, you've just sparkled. We've just sparked an idea and it's sparkled. So it's like a firework going off and then all the others sparkle around it. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you. Next question is from Martin, I believe. What strategies can we employ to help other colleagues who do not show willingness to engage with such approaches, or who are skeptical about the things you advocate?
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? My approach is I keep doing it, and I keep talking about when it's working, and I keep sharing the examples of you're not going to convert everybody. Some people are very set in their ways and they might have good reasons for that, and that's fine. Maybe it's what it worked and they're just hoping that our cohorts will go back to how they were. I don't think that's happening. I think our cohorts are changing massively, and they will continue to do, largely driven by external factors that we have no influence over. But the way I approach that is I keep doing the things I do and I talk about it when it works. So I talk about, oh my goodness, this student, look at this, what happened when the plant got hoovered up. Look, I mean, it's so funny. Look at this. And I talked about it in a session. I said, I'm so sorry for the loss of the plant. And should we plant another one? And we talk about those things. Or I talk about the students who were able to, I took away some of the stress around how do I fit in prayer this afternoon, and they were able to do it because of the micro breaks. So I just keep talking about the things I'm doing that are working and showing them how they're working. And most students, most of my staff are starting to move towards some of these things. And it's not, and I hope it's come across, I'm not saying do what I do, I'm showing you examples of what I do, and it's for you to come up with something that works for your own personality, teaching style and setting.
Thank you. I think that connects to the next question. Sorry, I lost the comment. From Adam. Yes, in terms of how your colleagues reacted to the approaches, and have they adopted similar things?
Yeah, lots have actually. The 3-minute breaks have been widely adopted, the checklist or versions of the checklist. So not everybody produces a physical checklist, but some will put a blackboard announcement out that is effectively the checklist of here's what's coming, but without the physical ability to tick it off. How have they reacted? Mostly very positively, especially when they're quick wins. None of us, we're all time poor. We're all having more demanded of us with big changes that, again, happening beyond our control. So I would say mostly very positively, very, very few big conflicts or anything like that around it. Disagreements, that's a better word, isn't it? Conflicts.
Thank you. Next question, I think, is from Anthony. A few questions in there, so I don't know if there's any that you want to tackle.
Okay, let's have a look. How much does belonging depend on intrinsic versus extrinsic? Quick, not so quick. the first one's a big one. I'll start with the first one. Intrinsic, extrinsic, yes. So when I said about belonging is dynamic, it really changes with students changing circumstances as well. So suddenly they might need to work. And so things that perhaps they hadn't appreciated, flexibility with seminar groups at different times, for example, might not matter to them in their first year. And if they have to start working in their second year because they need to supplement income, then those sorts of things become more important. So yeah, belonging is very dynamic. It changes for each student, even if their extrinsic factors, influences stay the same. So I think it's a continual moving, fluid, that's the word, that's a good word to describe it. It's a fluid state, isn't it, belonging? How does a relational approach impact on engagement with learning and on attainment? Don't just mean marks, but persistence of conceptual understanding and knowledge. Yeah, that's a great question. And I think multiple studies have shown that those connections, students who feel better connected are more likely to persist. They're more likely to hang around at university. There's other studies, and I forget the name of the lead author now, which I feel a bit bad for actually, who showed that you're more likely to stay on your course if your friends stay on your course. So that those people you've connected to on your course, if they stay on the course, you're more likely to stay on the course. So there's lots of evidence around the relational approach and those connections being important for retention and subsequently engagement with learning. And on attainment, it's because the and is underlined there. And on attainment, I don't know that I can recall a paper that's done both of those on a large scale. Lots of work on belonging is done on very small scale. I don't know anyone that's done both on a big scale, and I might be proved wrong, and by all means, I don't know all the literature, so pop it in the chat if anyone does know. My example around agency, choice of presentation, to what extent what students choose affects their subsequent confidence and ability to present. Oh, I don't know that I'd be able to unpick that, to be honest, because they really do have free choice. There's no limitation on, a quarter of you must choose topic A, a quarter of you must choose topic B. It's really up to them. And I think what would influence that is what they've done previously. And so the kind of topics that come up on that shortlist are really interesting. And they're starting to shift. This year, we had politics as one of the top 4 global challenges for biologists. I wouldn't necessarily have picked that. Ethics, AI come up. It's not the things that we perhaps might come up with as our top 4. So I think it's interesting and perhaps influences, given that current affairs and external factors like that are coming up in the top 4. I think it probably is heavily influenced by how engaged they are with those sorts of areas. Oh, and I've just seen what I'm getting at the bottom. I could have just gone to the end, couldn't I? What I'm getting at with all of the above is really, how do we know, should we, what contributes to belonging, given the perceived nebulousness of the very concept? Yeah, absolutely, Anthony. I completely agree. We don't. And I don't think it's time efficient, resource efficient to get too bogged down in trying to find the one size fits all approach, because it won't. But if you are enabling your students to connect with places, spaces and people within your context, and whether that's, like Lucian and I said, the examples of the business students, some of the sorts of things I've done, or being the examples you guys have all given about being human and using names, all of these things are providing opportunities for students to make those connections. And some of those connections will matter more to certain students than they will to others. Hopefully that answered that. Oh, Angela, yeah. Thanks. Mm-hmm. Oh, lots of kind comments. Oh, the belonging conference link isn't working. I will grab that separately in a moment.
I think scrolling through, someone else reshared that. I think it was Tom who shared the LinkedIn link.
Oh, okay. So nice. Katrina shared about regarding friendships, and then Kitty's got, is it the question from Kitty, Mel, that you were going to say? Yes. Yeah. So Kitty's put, do you have any suggestions for developing belonging for autistic students? So the umbrella of autistic students captures a very diverse group of students, and I think there is a misconception that autistic students need X or don't need Y, or this won't work for them. So I don't treat students with any neurodiversities any differently in the context of the things I put on. So growing the plants, for example, is a very, anybody could do that. It will work better for some than others. The idea of subtitles is very powerful for some students who are autistic, but not for all. So I don't think there's a blanket approach. I think what's important for all groups of students is that choice and that agency of whether to engage or not. So I personally, for example, I hate organised fun. So when you go to a wedding and there's a ceilidh and you're told you have to get up and dance, I'm like, I don't feel like dancing right now. And so I bring that into my teaching, and rather than going, let's all have fun now, and so I think that's perhaps something that is important for all students, but perhaps more so for students who might be autistic. I don't have any strategies that I employ solely for autistic students, is probably what I'm trying to say there, Kitty. I know that might be very helpful, but lots of what I do resonates. There's one thing we did that was very powerful, particularly noticeably for autistic students, was in Welcome, where we had, so obviously I'm from a science background, and we had day 2 of our Welcome week, we had some drama lecturers come in, and we asked them to take over the session, and we put it on the timetable as something like, I can't remember what we called it now, connecting, can't remember the name, but it wasn't very specific what we called the session. And so the students turned up, and they were all sat around the edge of the room on day 2 that they've been at university, sat around the edge of the room at the start on their phones. And we were like, okay, hi, I'm Kelly, I lead this module, this is your course director, Helen, but we're not going to lead this session, here's some drama teachers. And the students are like, oh my God. And the drama teachers just got them playing Grandmother's Footsteps and games like that. And when it became really powerful is when we saw all the students, they had to put their phones away and they started playing and laughing with each other, and they didn't even know each other's names at this point. And one of the activities they did was with a load of cardboard boxes. So maybe this is something that could work nice in an engineering setting, actually. Loads of cardboard boxes, and we had a toy car, a little wooden toy car. Well, we had a few, because we had a few student groups, and we said, here's some cardboard boxes, here's some tape. Get this toy car from this side of the room to that side of the room using just these boxes and tapes. So they had to build ramps and bridges. And we saw students who, at the time, I didn't know had an autistic diagnosis, but I'm quite experienced with students now. And I wasn't surprised when I found out they had a diagnosis. Because they weren't maintaining eye contact, they were trying to distance themselves from the groups and avoid engaging too much. But when we gave them that activity to do, they came into their own. They absolutely loved the engineering, the problem-solving element of it. So whilst it wasn't specifically for autistic students, Kitty, it was something that they really seemed to enjoy. But again, I don't know how many of the students who didn't enjoy it were autistic, just some of the ones that really, the very visible shift in how they engaged came from students who I subsequently found out were autistic.
Thank you. There's another question from Lou, I think. The measuring. Struggling to measure very successful, belonging work. How have you demonstrated this?
It's really hard because it's so dynamic, and I think we all know the challenges around NSS, and lots of the connections I'm talking about are built early on, and by the time you get to those big metrics later on, who knows what influences there have been outside of an academic life that have influenced how students feel belonging. There have been some really successful studies around diaries and focus groups and getting students to meet regularly and share their experiences. I know of others who have used props in our School of Education here. They've used props and asked students to create collages of what's helped them feel connected and a sense of belonging. And I think, go on, oh, sorry. And working with specific student groups. Tom, have you just put your mic up there? Thanks, Tom. I think I'm hearing myself again. Did you want to say something, Tom?
No. I switched my phone to my laptop. Sorry, that's my fault.
That's all right, don't worry. But working with specific student groups, mature student groups, there's lots of work around belonging for mature student groups, commuter student groups, distant learners, lots of examples of ways that you can keep those groups. They are groups that students often belong to throughout their academic journey, and you can get that longitudinal measure of sense of belonging by regular engagement points with them. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you. I think that was the last question that I saw in the chat. Anyone else with any? We have 3 more minutes left. Any final questions? Feel free to unmute your mic.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
The that very first slide where I told you my journey, can you just give me you can just do a thumbs up if you want to. Did it work? The idea of, did you find a connection with something that I said? Just something like that be useful. Yeah, brilliant. I ummed and ahed about how much detail to give you about my background. That's amazing. I'm glad it worked. Thanks. So that's, oh, Morgan, fellow UEL alumnus. Yeah, so I can see the walkway from here if you remember that, in the Sainsbury Centre, to give you some idea of where I am. Yeah, that idea. So that's a really simple way. If it worked in this setting, which is great, a really simple way. You don't have to tell your students your whole life history, and definitely keep some of yourself back from them. But they love to know when you've got a cat, or they love to know, something exciting that's happening. I've told them about the hedgehog we had in my garden, all these sorts of things. Give a bit of yourself, not too much.
Gareth has his hand up.
Thank you for that. I have to say that's a really nice way to kind of end the session, really, around that information sharing, humanizing you as the lecturer, because I know colleagues here will have the same experience I have, where there are many colleagues who say you absolutely shouldn't share anything at all about your life with your students, and you're some sort of automaton. Well, we're not, are we? We're real human beings and have a life. And I am constantly doing that. This is my journey. This is where I am. Why am I so good at academic writing? Because I've had 30 years of experience. Why aren't you? Well, because you're only 18 and you've only had 5 years or 3 years experience. It's giving them the context of who you are to help them understand that actually they have a journey yet ahead of them. So I think, thank you for that validation of that ability that I think most of us here are doing, which is sharing little bits and trying to humanize our environments.
There was, if I can finish with one more little anecdote, there was a session happening, a lab safety session in our final year project module, and we run some group projects here. So we have students in groups of 3 or 4 who might want to work together in the lab, and they were having a lab safety session together, and the person leading it mentioned his granddaughter, which made me think of something that he told me about what his granddaughter had done. His granddaughter's the same age as one of my children, and they had done this really beautiful forest school activity. And we went off on a complete tangent from lab safety and talked about it. And a student came up to me some months later and said, do you remember when you were talking, you and Mark, my colleague was Mark Common, do you remember when you went a bit off track and talked about that they withdrew their application to study a master's elsewhere because they knew they wanted to be taught in that kind of a context? And I was like, and I had another colleague who came up to me and went, I can't believe you did that. And I was like, but why? Like, we don't have to hide our life from them. And then this student came and said that they had chosen to stay here to do their masters because they wanted to be taught by those sorts of people who were human. And so I could go back to the colleague who was a bit reluctant and say, well, that thing that made you uncomfortable, it actually made a student, and maybe not all of them, maybe some of them felt we were a bit odd, but it actually made at least one student feel that it was a space that they wanted to stay in because they belonged there. Another one of my random stories. There's many more.
No, thank you. Lots of lovely comments in the chat, as you can see. I just wanted to say thank you for your time. Thank you for your presentation, for sharing all of these ideas. And I'm sure you will be hearing from some of the people in this call later on.
Amazing.
I will be sharing the slides. So thank you, Kelly, again.
I'll send you an update, shall I, Mel?
Lovely.
With my very important institutional logo on.
Of course, and the session is also being recorded, so we'll be sharing the recording as well. But thank you, everyone, especially Kelly, and hope you have a lovely rest of the afternoon and rest of the week.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.